What do I want to do here? I want to do something. Oh, hold on. Let's do that. And okay. I'm looking for Zoom. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to George Mason University's Evening Under the Stars lecture series and observatory tours. We are doing something a bit different because of the whole pandemic thing. We were doing virtual tours only. Now we are attempting to move back into the old in-person model. But at the moment, because people seem to really enjoy the virtual experience, we're now doing a hybrid sort of thing, which just adds a little bit more complexity to this operation. So I beg your patience for that. So I have folks here in front of me in Research Hall underneath the observatory, and I also have a few folks online who are watching as well. And so let's see, does this work? No, of course not. Hey, it does work. All right, so welcome to George Mason, specifically our observatory. We are currently in Research Hall, this building right here. Our observatory is on top of that silver thing, which is not in fact a grain silo, as I've heard it described. This is later on, you'll be going up there and you'll see that we have a control room over here. Obviously, that is the 32-inch telescope that we have on site. These images that you see here are images taken by our students, primarily students from PHOTO, the Friends of the Observatory, whom I'll talk about in a moment. And so this gives you an idea of the kinds of objects that we can see here in the night, or here in the light polluted region of Fairfax. Now you're going to be looking through the eyepiece, so the images are going to be a little bit more dilute, but this guy, like I said, gives you an idea of the types of objects that we can see here at George Mason. The way that our evening is going to go is these evenings go on for these evenings are pretty much every alternating Tuesdays, and the way they're structured is we have a speaker du jour who will speak for about 30-40 minutes, followed by a quick Q&A session, and then we will take you all to the observatory on the roof, and we will allow you to look through the telescope at a variety of different objects. Tonight, I think the best objects are going to be Saturn, Jupiter, and the binary star Albireo. So Jupiter at the moment actually is 1 day off of being in opposition. Opposition is the astronomer word for the closest it's going to be at any time. So our orbit and Jupiter's orbit are as close as they are to each other than they will be at any point in the year. And also because of the way the orbits are situated, we are the closest approach since the last 62 years, or we won't be as close to this for another 62 years. So what I'm trying to get at is that Jupiter is going to be big, bright, and beautiful. And you should also be able to see its Galilean moons, and hopefully the Great Red Spot. Saturn is also going to be a treat with its rings. And so that's going to be how the evening is going to progress for you, the folks here. For the folks online, unfortunately, because of the hybrid nature, once I'm done speaking, once I've given my talk, I will be ending the virtual environment yeah, going from there. I think we need to admit people. I need my helpers to start admitting people. Yep. So our observatory is not a one-person operation. If I haven't already introduced myself, my name is Dr. Rob Parks. I'm the Deputy Director here at our observatory. Our director is Dr. Peter Plavchan, an associate professor in the department. We have a number of, and that's not been updated. We have a number of grad students from Kevin Collins, M. Thanya Pong, Patrick Newman, and Mohammed sitting next to him. They are our graduate assistants who help us do pretty much anything that needs to be done, from observing or helping with public events such as this one to research observing, to coordinating. We also have a number of tour guides, undergraduates who also help out. S is here. I think S is actually on the roof getting things prepared to help us tonight. We also, and I would be remiss if I did not plug the Friends of the Observatory Club. This is a club run by Jonathan Saldana, who I think is in the audience, yes. And I cannot say enough about this club. This club has grown tremendously in the last couple of semesters, and they do tremendous amount of outreach. You can, when you join the club, there are monthly meetings, there are monthly nights called photons that you actually get your own private use of the telescope, of the 32-inch telescope, to observe pretty much whatever you want. They often have the solar telescopes set out on the sidewalk so that people can look through it. And very soon, we're actually going to be going out to Green Bank, West Virginia, to use a radio telescope, a 40-foot radio telescope. So those are the types of things that the Friends of the Observatory do for us here at George Mason. And they also take really pretty pictures, including serendipitous ones, such as this one. I actually honestly don't even remember what these two objects are, but the object right there that's being highlighted by those two little lines is a supernova. So we were able to see a supernova through our telescope by one of the students, Friends of the Observatory, actually using it for astrophotography. They wanted to make a pretty picture of that, and they, just by happenstance, were able to catch a supernova, which is an exceedingly rare and powerful event in the universe. My aim, I've only been here for roughly 2 years. One of my major goals when I was hired here was to expand our outreach considerably. And in order to do that, unfortunately, reality is we need money. So if you are interested in supporting what we do here at George Mason, particularly in terms of research, in teaching, or in outreach, I would ask that you consider being a patron of the observatory. You can do so at a variety of different levels, as you can see here. Or if you're just interested in, I'll just do it this way. There we go. Or if you're just interested in what we're doing here at George Mason, I would ask you to subscribe to The Moon, or the Mason Observatory Outreach newsletter. In it, we have information about projects that students are doing within the department, astro news, such as the most recent historic event of us slamming a small metal object into a large rocky object, to see how that would work. Constellation of the month, things of that nature. So I would highly recommend subscribing to that if you're interested in astronomy and what we do here in George Mason. All right, so with that said, let's proceed to my talk, assuming that I can actually. Let's see. This one. That's what I want. Slideshow. So I hope that folks online can still see this. Please pardon the crudeness of this model. This is a snapshot or a sketch of a much larger talk that I would like to give at some point later on. And this is something that this is a topic of a lecture series that is currently going on through the Smithsonian Associates. And I have entitled this The Next Environmental Crisis, and that might seem a little alarmist, and it should be. That was intentional. So what is the next environmental crisis? Mega-constellations. Now, what do I mean by a mega-constellation? What I mean is a satellite grouping that basically does a single job. Now, you've probably all heard of one. Who in here can think of a large collection of satellites that are currently being deployed into orbit? Yeah, Starlink. Exactly. There's no real clear definition of what a mega-constellation is, but I've basically ad hoc that 100 satellites all doing the same job. Now, what are those jobs? They vary quite a bit, all the way from GPS to weather monitoring. Actually, NASA is intending to put up their own constellation of satellites simply to monitor the climate in real time. But if you pay attention to these two bars here, those two bars indicate the number of satellites being used for broadband internet and cellular service. They are by far and away the most prominent uses of satellites in orbit, specifically Starlink. I don't know why. Maybe it's over here. And here you can see something of what's kind of where I'm starting to get to when I talk about crisis. This is a little bit outdated. It's from January of last year. At the time, Starlink, or the US, Starlink only had about 1,000 satellites in orbit. China, none. The United Kingdom, about 112, and so forth and so on. But you can see where it's heading. Starlink wants to put up 42,000 satellites within the next, I think, 5 years. China wants to put up its own 13,000 satellite constellation. UK wants to put up 6,000, so forth. Again, most of this for broadband communication, which you might ask the question, well, that doesn't seem like, or might make the comment, that doesn't seem like such a bad thing. Why should we not put internet around the world? Why should we deprive the people of the broadband internet who would ordinarily not be able to get it? Well, as it turns out, if you do the analysis, the only country that really this plays a factor into is China. All of the other countries, all the other countries, broadband internet can be brought to remote peoples or rural peoples pretty much cheaply or on par with satellite constellations. So this is not the only answer to that problem. Here is an example. Here is an image of Starlink. Its first 60 satellites. So it pops it sends a grouping of them up and then deploys them. So this is the first 60. Every launch since then, they deploy about 40 at a time. So each one of these things, this, all the way down, each one of those is a satellite about the size of a car that it pops into space. I'm actually going to do.
Could you make Mohammed a host to let people in?
Oh, all right, yeah. Sorry, a little bit of co-host. Aha. Okay, Mohammed, you should be able to do that. There's something else I wanted to show. Where is it? That's related to this. Oh, whoops, make co-host. Come on. Come on. This is something that I filmed actually last Saturday night. So I'm going to mute it because at the time I didn't know. I had no idea what this was, and that's basically what you're going to hear. If you listen to this, that's what you're basically hearing is me saying I have no idea what this is. As it turns out, this is a rocket. So this is going to become more and more of a common sight for folks. As I learned before, so I'm standing in a field in Warrenton, Virginia, which is basically kind of the middle of nowhere in Virginia. And it's during a stargazing event that NOVAC, the Northern Virginia Astronomy Club, is hosting. And all of a sudden we see this in the night sky. I'm kind of freaking out. You can see here how big this thing is. And it's trucking. It's in the southern sky and it's moving from west to east. What I find out later on is that this is the second stage of a Falcon 9. So a set of Starlink satellites had just been deployed, and this stage is now traveling through the upper atmosphere. And this is the bow shock of that rocket stage as it goes through the atmosphere. So yeah, that's going to become more of a thing. So. Oops, how about that one? All right. So yeah, that basically is what it looks like once these get deployed. The thing that is deploying them flies back down into space and does its thing. So I'm gonna detail two things. One, obviously, I'm an astronomer, so I'm going to look at it first from an astronomy point of view. Right now, well, first off, let me tell you that the number of satellites now has doubled since last year alone. All satellites. We're talking Sputnik. We're talking the ISS. We're talking all objects in the known sky since the 60s. Within the last year, that number has doubled. And that's only going to get worse. So astronomers are really kind of irritated by this because we get to see things like this. This is a satellite, or this is a large, about an 8-meter telescope, cost a couple $100 million to build, down in Chile. And its job is to monitor the sky all the time. Basically, it does a deep sky survey. It's looking to answer some fundamental questions like what is dark matter? What is dark energy? And it has to contend with this. This was taken when there were only 1,000 Starlink satellites up. Elon wants to put 40,000. And so you might think, oh, well, why not go to space? Okay, here's Hubble. And that's a starlight going across Hubble's field of view. JWST, thankfully, is not going to have that problem because we put JWST a million miles away. And so it doesn't have to worry about stuff. But that's one of the reasons why going to space is really not the answer to this question, is that you're still going to have things in the way. It's not, my screen share isn't working. Okay. Have you tried turning it off and on again? How about now? What does that yellow bar up there say?
Because your screen sharing is paused. Your Zoom share. Reading the play button.
Thank you. That would be why. Why is that even a lever? Why do we have that lever? Well, you guys should be here in person. All right, let me be the IT guy. Let me turn it off and turn it back on again. Yeah. Resume. I have not encountered this problem before. So has
Can you see the Zoom on the computer?
Yeah, it's here. Yes.
Let's see.
Oops. All right, no, that's all right. I am just for the kindness of the people who have arrived, I'm just going to continue. If someone, one of my assistants can figure out why the resume share button does not work, that doesn't work, let me know. But unfortunately, I'm just going to have to move on. So we've got that. Now, Elon was not, Mr. Musk was not shy about, as he's not shy about anything. We knew this was coming. We knew that Starlink was going to show up. And so we had an idea of how bright it was going to be. Well, really quickly, we blame Hipparchus for the archaic system that we have for determining brightnesses of things. Hipparchus, back in the day, said, all right, the brightest things in the sky, I can call them first magnitude. The faintest things in the sky, I can call them sixth magnitude. So 6.5 is the dimmest that our human eye can see. Mr. Musk assured us that his satellites would be around the 7th magnitude. So satellites would not be able to be seen with the naked eye. Well, this is what they asked, the blue dots. Then we asked him, hey, can you do something about this? Now, to Starlink's credit, and I do have to give them credit for this because this is it's going to come back to the issue at the very end. We astronomers as a community asked Starlink, hey, can you do something to mitigate this? And they said, sure. They didn't have to. They could have just told us to go take a hike. But they said, okay, let's work with you. And so they tried two different things. They tried what is called the dark sat, where they literally just started painting stuff black to get rid of the reflectivity. Unfortunately, that didn't really work because when you paint stuff black, it heats up. So the internal, so the efficiency of the satellite went down, so they mixed that black. Then they said, well, all right, what if we put visors on the thing? Block the sunlight that's causing the reflections. Well, that seemed to work. It actually dropped this off by about an order of magnitude. But unfortunately, the satellites, one of the innovations with the new Starlinks is that they can communicate with each other using lasers, which are blocked by those visors. So that's gone. So we're back to this problem. Now, We currently have, this is the Vera Rubin telescope. It is being built in Chile. Being on a really high mountain in the middle of nowhere is ideal for astronomers. This thing is it is immense achievement. I would say it's actually on par with JWST. Unfortunately, it's not going to get the same amount of press. This telescope is going to survey the entire southern sky once every 3 days. It's going to take a deep image, basically a JWST type of image, everywhere in the sky once every 3 days. It's going to have terabytes worth of data downloaded per day. The amount of data that we're going to get from this observatory cannot be understated. Those same goals that JWST wants to look at, exoplanets, dark energy, where did we come from? Is there life in the universe? These are also going to be answered by Vera Rubin. The other thing that Vera Rubin is going to do that JWST can't is, how many of you are familiar with the DART mission that just happened? For those of you who are not aware, the DART mission is that what I was just talking about before, where NASA built a satellite for the sole purpose of shooting it into a rock, specifically an asteroid, to see if they could deflect its path. The reason for that, simply put, is that the likelihood of us being hit by an asteroid, which will do substantial damage to some region of the planet, is significantly non-zero. Now, if you're talking about planet killers, that's unlikely. But if you're talking about things that could lay waste to regions of continents or continents themselves, that's really not a negligible thing. So DART its mission was to figure out what we're going to do once we find them. But the main problem is finding them. Vera Rubin, we currently have some satellites that are devoted to this. Vera Rubin's going to put them to shame. If we're going to find these asteroids that are a danger to this world, that telescope is the one that's going to do it. Unfortunately, those trails that you see, just because of the way that those asteroids are detected, these trails greatly interfere with that mission. So if this gets worse and we cannot mitigate it through software, then we will potentially miss a great number of asteroids that could potentially lead to all sorts of problems. You also have and this is to show you that astronomers are really great at naming stuff on stuff. This is the TMT, stands for the 30-meter telescope. I bet you can guess why it's called the 30-meter telescope. This is the ELT, the extremely large telescope. I'm not joking. This is the US's endeavor. This is the Europeans' endeavor. These cost billions of dollars. This whole thing, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars from an international collaboration that mega-constellations are going to do serious harm to. The amount of research that we're doing and the amount of the science that can be gained is going to they're not going to get their money's worth, basically, is what I'm ultimately trying to say. So what if you don't care about that? What if you don't care about astronomy? That's all right. So long as I get my internet, I'm good. Well, there's something else I want you to clue in on. This is what the satellites look like in low Earth orbit. The vast majority of satellites in orbit are in low Earth orbit. We're talking about the orbit on the scale of the ISS and the Hubble Space Telescope. These are basically, this is the histogram. These are the locations of them and heights of kilometers above the Earth's surface. I bet you can't guess where or what this flight corresponds to. Said Starlink, you're right. Here's another visualization to it. Basically, the color coding here indicates inclination, how the orbits are aligned relative to, say, the equator or the poles of the Earth. Here's another representation of it. This is the International Space Station. This is the Hubble Space Telescope. These red lines, those are Starlink. And then the other ones, the blue ones, I believe, are the UK satellite constellation. My point with this is that I hope you can see that space is big. There's a lot of it. But because of what we want to do with these satellites, space has gotten a little bit smaller. You can see that there are these space lanes that have developed. You can't just put a satellite anywhere. In order to get that internet to where you want it to go, you have to put it in very specific orbits, which means you're crowding that area, which leads to junk. So this is the current objects that are currently in space, from basically the inception, from Sputnik all the way up to the present day. The blue line is basically active satellites. So you can see these are satellites that are currently being used. You can see that exponential rise that I was talking about. The green ones are just leftover rocket debris that they delivered their payload, and now the rocket payload is now floating out in space. You've got dead satellites that are just hanging out there. That leads to debris. One of the reasons why so in this line corresponds to the total amount of stuff that's out there. One fun thing to consider is that now we're getting into the realm of space basically starting to really get militarized, or dangerous, or the marriage between space and military is getting scaringly close, to the point that the Chinese have already developed an anti-satellite weapon system. So this is a single test where they blew up a single satellite. You can see the amount of debris shot up by a factor of 10. So the amount of debris basically got multiplied by 10 from that one test. The Russians are doing the same. I'm sure the United States probably going to do the same thing as well. This is the collision of a Russian satellite with a dead Russian satellite. Again, the amount of debris that it caused went skyrocketing. So the risk of collisions up there is, again, non-zero, and it's getting worse. Now, if we were able to mitigate this, basically, if we were able to put up like 2,000 launches a year and have a settled 10,000 satellites, 10,000 satellite quota, meaning when you reach 10,000, you can't put any more up. You have to wait until something comes down. You still have a cumulative number of collisions, and this is a log number. So here you're talking about, this is 10,000 collisions per year. This is 10,000 collisions, it's 100,000 collisions. If you have, ultimately, what this plot is saying is you have unregulated growth, that risk of collision gets even worse. And I've been focusing on Starlink for a couple of reasons. But the one I'll point out is obviously because it's an American. However, we are living in a world. This is an international collaboration. China themselves are, as I may have mentioned before, they're putting up a 13,000 satellite constellation, mega-constellation of their own. And what I find to be curious is Rwanda has recently filed with the International Telecommunications Unit that they want to put up 327,320 satellites. Guess how many satellites Rwanda currently has in orbit right now? 0. Within the next 3 years, they want to put up 300,000. Now, there's probably some political, there is a suggestion that this is simply political. They don't actually mean to do this. They're basically just carving out their own space so that when they do put satellites up, they can put them wherever they want to. But technically speaking, they have applied and been granted permission to put up 300,000 satellites. So my issues So the main issues that I'm seeing is that this is going to have heavy impacts to essentially $1 billion industry, and that is scientific research. And it's completely unregulated. It's the Wild West. There is no international, the international community or the UN has just now formed a committee to start looking at these issues. Right now, somebody can put up any number of satellites. They are not concerned about how bright they are. So the fact that Starlink actually talked to us was amazing. They had no reason to, or they had no compunction to. They were not legally obligated to. They can put them anywhere they want, and they can get rid of them in any way they want. And this is something I didn't really touch on. Right now, 50 tons of meteorite material hits the Earth every day. We're constantly being bombarded by stuff. 50 tons of it comes down. Starlink's plan is that their satellites will last 5 years apiece. Their solution to this is once the satellite reaches an old age, they're going to deorbit the thing. It's going to fly, or it's basically going to deorbit, get disintegrated in the Earth's atmosphere, and they're going to put up another one. At its height, that's going to add another 60 tons of material, of space junk material that's going to fall onto this planet when those things get deorbited. And so who knows what putting that much aluminum in the upper atmosphere is going to do. And we really have been looking at it. One of the reasons for this is that right now, space is not considered an environment. So there is no regulatory, so anything that we do have on the books for regulating environments, for environmental impact studies or whatever, since space is an environment, they aren't held liable to that. So my point, I know this has kind of been a depressing talk, apologize for that, but I think this is a very important issue, that space is an environment, and we're getting to the point now where unless we actually look at this from a clear eye, and look at the situation and the possible implications of this situation, then we may be causing literally catastrophic damage, not just from atmospheric effects, but it seems like every 6 months or so, the Chinese we have to look up, because the Chinese have a rocket section that there's just tumbling to the Earth, and we have no idea where it's going to land. We literally have no idea where it's going to land until it actually does. So yeah. So are there any questions about that? Yeah.
Didn't SpaceX try to coat the solar panels with a different type of reflective material?
That was dark side. That was, yeah, they attempted to make it darker, but unfortunately that led to the satellite becoming warmer and the electronics failing. So yeah.
Are you familiar with any projects or research being done about collecting like orbital space debris kind of came up low Earth orbit and things like that?
Nope. Because there isn't anything, honestly. That is something that NASA is being pressed to look into, but they just haven't really had the time or the budget to do it. And as far as I know, none of the other countries are looking into it itself. Again, we have all this debris up there, and yet no one seems to be really caring about it. So, any other questions? Yes.
Will any of them deorbit naturally, or once they're up there, some of them are just stuck there?
They will all eventually deorbit. Whether or not they're controlled, like Starlink's, where they basically are sent into the atmosphere for a long enough rinse cycle that they basically disintegrate. That's one thing. Or they could be uncontrolled, like the Chinese rocket payloads that they just fall. If they fall on something, great. If they don't, well. Give you an idea of kind of the danger of this. The Soviets actually did this to the Canadians. A Soviet satellite deorbited unexpectedly and dumped radioactive material over pretty much good 2/3, a swath that was about 2/3 of the Canadian territory. Thankfully, at least in a sense, Canada is very unpopulated. So there really were no, at least fatalities or injuries because of that. But Canada really had no legal recourse to hold the Soviets accountable for, hey, you just dumped a whole bunch of radioactive waste on our country. Soviets gave them a little bit of money, and that was basically it. So, any last questions? All right, now to cheer you all up, we will take you upstairs so you can see an amazing view of Jupiter, Saturn, and probably Albireo, maybe some other stuff. So thank you all for coming. Mhm. Hello, folks, online. I apologize. I don't know why this the share didn't come back, but now I wish you a good night, and if you can, please make it out to our next evening under the stars in person. All right, bye.